good afternoon, and welcome to Brian Tyson, the big banana at SEC Newgate, the country's leading policy advocacy, lobbying outfit, Australian arm of a local business, and organisation that's pretty heavily involved in Western Sydney. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here. Strategic communication.
Strategic communication.
Probably the best.
Summary. You're looking resplendent for a gentleman from the Riverina. You've kicked on the country boy.
Oh, well, the Riverina is a great place. So the Riverina's kicked on too.
Not as a result of you leaving it. Brian, I said SEC Newgate, part of a local arm of a global strategic communications entity, heavily engaged in the politics of this town, this city, representing organisations who legitimately want to talk to government in a legitimate way. Should say, just this week we've seen some new regulations come out from government about regulating the awful lobbying sector. What is it to think about blokes like us that have media and politicians and the community so worried?
Well, I think it's I don't think people like your company and our company are the targets of this. I think they're after,
we know the ones who are.
Yes. And I think, what was encouraging in that report was that they found that there was a legitimate role and a public interest in the ongoing role of advocacy advice for business and industry engagement with government. Because in the absence of that, governments can only rely on the public sector for advice, and that does not lead to good outcomes from a whole of community perspective. So I think that's encouraging. I don't think the laws, as the changes that they're advocating will have much impact on us, I think, at all. I think by and large, we don't engage directly with government in any case. Our clients are big enough and ugly enough to engage directly. It's more about what they say when they get there, and that's the role we play. It's really about making an argument, making a case, preparing that for them, and then they can go and do that.
Isn't it strange? It's considered entirely appropriate that lawyers would represent organisations, individuals in public administration, advising, advocating, but somehow if a lobbyist, strategic communicator does it, it's distorting democracy in some manner.
Well, the report's contradictory in that sense, because it acknowledges it's a genuine, important role, and then proceeds to sort of pick winners in terms of who can and who can't. And I think, a glaring error in all of this is that lobbying is, as a term, and, it's only about 10% of our business, to be honest, is genuinely anyone as a third party advocating on behalf of another organisation. And of course, that therefore includes law firms, accounting firms, and they're not captured by this, which they're probably happy about. But as I say, it doesn't really impact us.
Look, so you and I, for many years, have plied our trade advocating for major infrastructure in this town, particularly in Western Sydney. From a dialogue perspective, of SEC Newgate as a partner of the dialogue. And you're actively engaged in other things like the Committee for Sydney and others as well. Your organisation that gets involved and lends a hand. We've just come through a federal election. We're heading for a state election. Western Sydney continues to be one of the most dynamic electoral areas. And as I've said before, it's got a lot of marginality. It does make politicians listen. What is it you think about the nature of Western Sydney that has it poised as an important leader and the opposition leader and the Premier both saying the path to victory in New South Wales is through Western Sydney? What is it about the region that causes that dynamism, and how best do we leverage that advantage for the people we represent, the communities right across the West?
Well, I think, Western Sydney, I think we've probably got to stop using that term, because Western Sydney seems to want to capture a whole diverse group of.
We've gone up and called it Greater Western Sydney now, by the way, so it's going to get better.
But it's a very dynamic area of great little CBDs, or not little CBDs, significant and substantial regions in their own right. So I kind of think we need to stop thinking about it as Western Sydney. It is, it is Parramatta, it is Liverpool, it is Blacktown, it is Penrith. These are all thriving and emerging significant CBDs and areas of business that, we're going to have to start engaging on that kind of level, rather than just considering it as there's the city and then there's Western Sydney. I think You know, it's
And there's increasingly two Western Sydneys. There's the Central River City and the Western Parkland City, that bifurcation that's already happening within.
and it's fascinating, and it is, you know, it's cliche, but so much of the population of Sydney resides west of George Street. You know, it's extraordinary. You know, that's perhaps the nature of the geography of how Sydney was established. You know, we're at a disadvantage compared to a lot of other cities that, you know, great river cities, or, you know, even Melbourne, you know, the city's allowed to develop all around it. The CBD here was developed on the very fringe of the East Coast. And so we have this the challenges that emerge as the city has to grow west, or initially did. And that brings with it huge infrastructure challenges. And so that, you know, the fringe of Western Sydney is a long way away from the traditional, or the what was the genuine CBD, which is why we do need to start thinking about a cluster of CBD.
And there's votes in that growth, in those growth communities.
100%. And, you know, that's entrepreneurial spirit, you know, the multicultural communities that, you know, that brings with it risk-taking, entrepreneurial spirit, investment, risk-taking opportunities, and that develops, you know, significant new.
We like to talk about it being a bit of a hustler, without it being, you know, it's sort of, it's a new money kind of approach. One of those other dynamics about Western Sydney politics we've spoken about before is probably social conservatism, which might tie into with the migrant communities. While it's no longer relevant, you just said in the old days, Western Sydney left, Eastern Sydney right as a natural split. While that's in itself changing, against that, there's a Western Sydney conservative, Eastern Sydney more progressive as well. We saw, you know, the latte line we talk about, that diagonal line across, also was a divider of the Republic, yes or no vote. It was a divider of of marriage equality. This new federal government has probably two referenda in the next two terms, coming on both Uluru Statement of the Heart and Republic again. What do you think is about that sort of strange way social conservatism of a dynamic growth region? They sometimes don't seem to go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, I think that both those referenda will, I mean, they're both very challenging outcomes. Referendum generally have been very challenging. And I think, yeah, I think it's really genuinely those communities not wanting to be taken for granted, or not wanting to be told how to think. So I think that's a big part of that conservatism. That's, you know, they don't want to be told that just because, you know, the latte line progressives think this way, so you should automatically think that way. People don't like that, and that's why, you know, parties that focus on meeting in the centre, I still think are the parties that will be successful.
Does the country boy in you help you understand Western Sydney a little more?
Well, I think it does. I grew up in the town of Griffith, which is, I think it's probably the most multicultural town in the world. That's my line. And I'm
not just the Italians, a range of broader.
No, there's about 90 nationalities. Wow. And, you know, and it is a very entrepreneurial, very wealthy district as a function of the entrepreneurs and that sort of waves of migration that have come through, starting with predominantly the Italians before the Second World War, now chasing the water. And, you know, what that has developed is all of that money stays in town, and it's created this extraordinary, harmonious and diverse community,
which is starting to happen in Western Sydney. In my generation,
in Western Sydney,
you had any talent or ambition or social progression, you progressed out of Western Sydney, and you went to the city. You had to go for university. There was no WSU, etc. But now Western Sydney's retaining its talent. People are living at home longer. Less university students chalking and joining boards and working 3 jobs while they're doing their thing and wanting to stay and work in the region. You'll be seeing your client base address of clients now that are well outside the Sydney CBD and stretching across.
And in particular, sometimes they're still headquartered here, but their projects are out in pockets of Western Sydney or in the regions. You know, there is genuinely they're chasing the opportunity. To your point, people are also starting to see that the opportunity, they don't have to chase the opportunity outside of where they live, because they're getting, you know, that opportunity in terms of jobs, in terms of cultural activity, in terms of nightlife, etc. That's all slowly but surely being developed in those regions, you know, and overcoming the significant challenges.
And amenity that they're looking for now.
overcoming the significant geographical challenges that is unique to Sydney. That makes it harder, but we're getting there.
That tyranny of distance. You and I have worked on infrastructure projects together and alongside for many years. We used to talk about social license as some trendy woke sort of term that's now coming home to be absolute. It's like in Western Sydney, amenity isn't a nice thing. Amenity is productivity for us now.
Yeah.
Social license is you get your project up or not.
Yeah.
Are you seeing across the client base, public and private sector, more than just a nod to community engagement and social license now? It's been front-ended instead of just the icing on the cake?
100%, and planned well and truly in advance. I mean, not everyone gets it right. That's why we have some problem projects, and even well designed and well advocated for projects with genuine community outreach and front loading, sort of buying and bringing the community off the ride. A lot of those projects sometimes don't get as a function of years of it, and lazy decision making in planning departments as well. But I think corporates and industry and bodies wanting to engage in major projects, social license is fundamental. I think they get that, and planning that well in advance certainly helps smooth the way for projects.
We've both been in bid rooms where there's 100 engineers and bankers on a project and one lonely PR guy in the corner as a cost center saying, it's about the community. That's really shifting as well. So your office has grown, so I gather it's shifting in that there's a deep well of business understanding and investment into genuine engagement community, genuine corporate leadership. We're about to strike this year the DigitalDialogue medal for honouring the great civic corporate leadership that we're seeing. To that end, we've went through a period in New South Wales with massive privatisation revenue, natural disasters and things that have had government back in town. Even in a coalition government, it's been a remarkable time for big government. Do you think we're capable of shifting back, of getting government to wean itself off a little bit and and is the private sector ready to take a seat at the table, not just as the supplier, supplicant, but as a genuine back to being a partner of government in design, in city shaping, the sort of things that Dick Dusseldorp, founder of Lend-Lease, had so dear to his heart? Do you get there's a sense on government side to welcome it and there's a private sector to step up, or are they too pinstriped and risk averse these days to step back in?
I think it's a cycle. It's a wheel. It's a big wheel, and I think the wheels, we're at that one end of that cycle, and I think it will shift back. I think
it's like a socialist dream at the moment of a conservative government. It's quite political watches. It's kind of weird that where are the dries, the small L dries in the liberal governments who have been so wonderful in providing services and government funded infrastructure.
But government, and it will turn, but not immediately, because we're not at the end of this process. We've got significant challenges, and the Albanese government has faced significant challenges. If there's a change of government in New South Wales or whoever wins the next election, will face significant challenges. So the role of government will still be really important as a function of that, but ultimately the penny will drop around where the solutions will come from, and that will be the innovation, the investment from the private sector that will help drive that outcome. I don't think we're quite there yet. Brave governments will have to adopt that because there's no alternative. Because the next 6 to 12 to 18 months is going to be a very challenging time.
Put your political strategist hat back on. Before we go to the state election looming, the federal election that's passed, there appears to be, and I base this not on my political friends, my non-political friends talking, this sense of in the country, we've just got a little bit, not call it nicer or calmer.
Yeah.
But one, an election cycle's gone. Two, the new government, the Albanese government appears to be probably more steady than a lot of people considered. Apart from the teals, what lessons do Dominic Perrottet and Chris Minns take from a federal election when coming into a state election in 9 months' time?
Well, I think there was a big it's time factor in the election. For better or for worse, the government represented a period that was just a very tough period for people to go through in COVID and bushfires. So a lot of it not of their own making, but people just wanted to wanted to circuit break it. So the its time factor was fundamental. And that's the big challenge for Ferrite.
Is Ferrite insulated the state government? 4 premiers, it's almost like 4 governments. Is he insulated the government from its time, or is that very difficult to do?
Its times, it'll be a 12-year-old government. I think it's been a good government. But 12 years is a long time, so it'll be their big challenge overcoming the its time factor.
And what has Binns learned from the Albanese ascension?
Small target, dare I say, and I think they've presented themselves pretty well for the opposition in New South Wales, and they haven't been just throwing rocks either. They've been constructive, and that serves themselves well.
That was a big change from Jody Mackay to Chris Minns. The fundamental change of I'm not going to screech and wail.
Yeah,
can be said through a pandemic, said to be productive.
Yeah, and he was, and he presented himself well. I mean, as you get closer to the election, there will be a more rigorous assessment of policy framework. But there is a good team on the opposition benches as well. Best team for some time. So I think but they will have to articulate some kind of policy framework. I don't think they will have the luxury that the Albanese team seem to have, that they didn't really need to articulate a strong.
They don't have the depth yet that as a bunch of ex-cabinet ministers. So.
Well, that's true, and that's why they've started well.
You
have really started.
Like the rest of Sydney, do you shake your head, wonder how a long-term state government delivered a pretty special budget, an anti-Teal budget this time, and a day later, John Barilaro out of New York popped up? It's hard to comprehend how that's.
I don't want to go there. Just shake your head, really.
You're an ex-staffer. People must have had eyes on this. There must have been oh my God. Or is it just in the changeover of leader, some things just slipped through in that many days of.
I don't know what happened there, but I mean, I'm reading it like you were reading it. It's a bit head shaking.
So I was a big believer in the Agent General, big believer in the Trade Commission idea, and the Premier said of your state of Japan, and we're very important in Western Sydney about a Japan-Western Sydney relationship. So, Speaker, let's hope not the Barilaro process affects the action of needing a trade engagement and outward looking, a state government that is stepping up on its own, doing the outside, not waiting for.
But there's a rule of thumb, without commenting on that particular circumstance.
Which is hard to do without giggling.
I know, but ex-politicians can be very good in these roles.
They have a role to play, absolutely.
And
Nick Griner is playing a great role as the Commonwealth Consul General in New York.
And you do need, particularly in a place like New York, it's a tough market to crack, and getting and knowing your way around town and getting in and pushing and shoving and advocating takes a bit of front, and you probably the hurly-burly world of politics is probably a good.
I'll finish. I want to ask you for a guess of who's going to win the next state election, but seats to watch, issues that will resonate in the West, things that we should be tapping into and leveraging up, let no great opportunity go unleveraged in our world.
Well, I think, in addition to its time factor, I think incumbency through the pandemic was a great advantage 12 months ago. It's a huge disadvantage now.
That wheel has turned quicker.
Yeah, and so the smartest premier in the room is the Tasmanian premier, who took a big punt going early because they went very early, but they took advantage of just being still in that cycle and won.
Could be the only Liberal leader in the country after March if Don doesn't get up. That's possible. Nothing on the mainland.
Yeah, that's right. But there are cycles, and I think it's been close to this in my lifetime anyway.
And I think don't underestimate the next 9 months a Perrottet government getting very close to an Albanese government.
Indeed, and it's as I said, it's been a good government, and I think I was at a breakfast with Chris Minns this morning, and he acknowledged that, particularly on the capital investments.
That's right.
It's been a very good government. It's a 12-year-old government. Lots of challenges. It won't be easy. It's time factor, incumbency. It's and people still wanting to, but perhaps not the baseball bat they had at a federal level, but That's the greatest pathway for success for the Perrottet government, is that, people have vented, and that, this government has been a pretty good government. And we don't want all red. Maybe that's there.
Right, so it's two bright young,
Yeah.
dynamic leaders going head to head, who've both said Western Sydney is the key to their success, and we don't let opportunities like that go past. We're going to take everything we can at it. You'll starting to see a bit more of Brian and his colleagues in the next few months as we finish our election manifesto, present to opposition and to government, hold a couple of forums along the line, and set Newgate, as they say. If they're not looking after you politically, they should. Give Brian a call. It's a great new office here. He's doing all the help he can. It's wonderful. But mate, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, mate. Good to see you.
Doing Western Sydney Unfiltered. We'll have to do Griffith Unfiltered.
Absolutely.
Start.
Love to.
All right. Flash dress report on Griffith. Thanks, everybody.
See you.